Hello there, Ren Fair fans. My name is Victoria Van Arnam, and I perform as the Lady Victoria. Joining us today is Olivia Harding from Music the Gathering.
Hello, hello.
And we're visiting with Magnolia Strange from the Judas and Magnolia show. Hello, ladies.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
So you perform with Judas and Magnolia is the name of your act, and you are Magnolia of the titular. And you perform at the Renaissance festivals. It's an escape also with you have a mind reading show now that's a part of your element. That's a very exciting.
So when I talk about Judas and Magnolia, I generally say we're a husband and wife team of variety artists. And right now we're mostly focusing on escape artistry, our mind reading show, as you already said, and vocal performance and some fire performance as well. But I like to kind of introduce it as variety to let our audience know what to expect. So it's a little bit of everything, really. Our show, it's got some narrative theater bit to it. It's going to be a lot of audience participation, and we have a background in variety and circus arts. So we've studied in mime, we've studied clown, we've studied different kinds of object manipulation, hula hoops, juggling, etc. So you're going to see some of that stuff sprinkled all throughout our shows. But yeah, you can get a little bit of everything, and that's part of what I really like about our shows is that it's a little bit of everything, not just in the variety of the skills that you see, but I always like to tell our audience too, our shows are going to be a little silly, they're going to be a little serious, so really it's an emotional roller coaster. So buckle up.
Amazing.
I like to give people that warning ahead of time.
I remember when we first met you guys, you were setting up and you, Magnolia, were singing, and then we saw the water tank and we thought, okay, there's a music act, but then we saw the water tank and we were like, okay, there's escape, but then there was mind reading, and we were thinking, so what don't they do? So I realized that the word variety is actually extremely accurate in your case. You get a whole sort of combo platter.
That's right. That's right. If you want a little bit of everything, come on over to the Judas and Magnolia show.
So we're really excited to have you on our show. And one of the main things we've talked about is a lot of people wonder, what do all these weirdos do when they're not on the stage? And so we'd love to ask you what you do on a typical sort of Monday through Friday when you're not performing at the Ren Fair.
That's such a great question. And I get it a lot from folks who are, fans who are newer to like Ren Fair, experience. And I've actually had folks say, oh, but you only work on the weekends, right? And, the way that I like to actually frame it is that we are full-time artists and entertainers, full-time. So what you see on the weekends, our stage shows, is really just the cherry on top of the sundae, on top of the full-time job. Like what you see when we're on stage is maybe 5% of my full-time job. Because what you've got to realize is not only are we, the actors on stage, I also do all my own hair and makeup. I am, our costumer. I am our tax guy. I'm our PR person, our social media guru, all the other things, right? We are our own booking agent. We write our own shows. It's yes and so that has to happen sometime, and that's what that Monday through Friday is about.
I'm curious and I'm curious to know your answer too, Victoria. Of all those hats you have to wear, which is your favorite and like the one that you don't mind doing? You're like, oh, I get to do this job. And which one are you like, I wish that I could offload this onto someone?
So for me, I went to, so when we were baby artists, when we were just starting to really pursue full-time arts and entertainment, we were based in St. Louis. And I've got to give a shout out to the St. Louis area. They have so much support for the arts and for artists. And they have something called the Regional Arts Commission, RAC. And they have, between the Regional Arts Commission and the VLAA, which is Volunteer Lawyers and Accountants for the Arts, those two organizations have created such an incredible support system for artists and entertainers in that St. Louis area. And So they would have all these workshops and everything. And I remember I went to one of them. It was so great. It was called the Accidental Arts Administrator. And it's for people like us who were like, I want to be an artist. And then you get into it and you're like, oh God, no one told me about contracts and numbers and what's all this? I have to make my own website and I have to, like, I just wanted to do music, or I just wanted to do fire, or I just wanted to do clown, or like whatever. Right. So it's this, that idea. I was like, they understand. The Accidental Arts Administrator. For me, that thing is the numbers. Numbers have never, the paperwork and the numbers are kind of panic inducing for me. And if I could have someone else, which, you know, bless my husband, he does the contracts, right? He does most of the contracts and the numbers, but like, oh man, taxes as an artist. It's, like I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah. I don't know when this is going to air, but we're currently doing this in January. And so for the next 3 months, I feel like is when all the people who do their own taxes are like, ugh. Like just today, I was on the phone with QuickBooks being like, hi, why are you broken? Because I have to send a 1099.
Yes, right. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I didn't know that I was signing up to be an accountant when I was signing up to be a full-time artist. But here we are.
The accounting is definitely not my least favorite part. Like I'm pretty okay with doing most of that stuff. My least favorite is definitely writing for social media. That is kind of my weakest link. I have a very like straightforward, like if I want to tell you something, it's going to be like a very short, concise thing. And it just doesn't lend itself to storytelling on a regular basis, which is what we're really doing here. You know, we're trying to tell stories and trying to create, I live a very fun and enjoyable life. And I would love to share that with people, but just telling you that's, you know, it just doesn't always come out. So the folks who've been following me for a while will understand what that looks like on the front side of that journey. But one can grow and develop. So that's my least favorite. My favorite is probably learning the new technologies and seeing it. I love business, right? Like I love doing business and seeing how it can grow and talking to people about it and stuff. And that's part of why we're here, is because I want to hear, you know, I like hearing about the art as well as how that interfaces to business, and like getting to work with other artists and getting to work with like seeing how they have tackled the same projects and same programs, you know, because we're all on a similar path, definitely not the same one by any means, but like sometimes, you know, I'll talk to somebody and they'll have figured out how to do, you know, all of shipping, like the entire process of like going through and figuring out how to ship stuff. And it's like, oh, so you did that. I trust you. I'm just going to do that entire thing too now. And now I don't have to go and research the whole process. So there's a lot that we can learn from each other and really develop by just a little bit of crossover. But boy, oh boy, is there not a whole lot of time to do that sometimes. So that's kind of a plus and minus on that process there. That's mine. Olivia? Yeah.
Well, I've already talked in past episodes, I think multiple past episodes, about housing, so I'm not going to do that again, even though it's miserable. But I want to talk about booking, because it is both my least favorite and favorite part of sort of administrative work, because my favorite part is just recently Music the Gathering redid for 2022 our promotional packet. And it's so much fun, like going through all the photos and finding the best ones and looking at old videos. It's like a nice little trip down memory lane and putting it all together to look pretty. And that's great. But then the actual process of sending it to the person and then panicking, like, did it go to their spam folder? Did they get it? And then they write back and they're like, is this much money better? And we're like, no, it's not better, but let's see if we can actually live off that amount of money, or if we should push back. But then is haggling okay? Maybe we should call 5 people who do that festival to know if haggling is okay or if that's rude. That's not fun.
That's interesting. So that is kind of a combo. That's like kind of a both. But you can't have one without the other. You don't get to just sit on that lovely little, you can't print it out and just kind of be like,
Yeah, I wish I could make a pretty little presentation, our little electronic press packet, and then throw it in the air, and a bunch of doves take it to all the people who would like it the most, and I don't have to worry about it again. Other people take it out of my hands.
Like it the most and give you the most money.
Yes.
Yes, combo.
So we can talk a little bit more about the performances that you do in your shows. What fairs have you done?
Well, okay, so for this next year, what year is it? It's 2022. So this year we're going to be at Kerrville, which is coming up here at the end of January, beginning of February. So that's a little show in Texas. And then we'll do Sherwood Forest Fair, kind of outside of Austin. From there, we're going to go to Georgia, which I'm super excited about. I know we're going to see you there, Victoria. After Georgia is Kentucky, which is just a delightful gem. Let's see. Okay, Kentucky. And then up to New York for the Sterling Renaissance Festival, which is so beautiful. What's after Sterling?
Ohio?
Then Ohio. Yeah, the hubs will fly out and do Utah. And then we'll do, that's a 1 weekend show. And then Ohio is so lovely. That's like a 9 weekend show in the fall. Oh my gosh, fall in the Midwest is just gorgeous. And then hopefully after that we usually do Hot Springs, which is so sweet. It's a 1 weekend show in Hot Springs, Arkansas, which is one of my favorite cities ever. If you haven't been, you should go. And then I think Louisiana will be after that. And then other shows that we've done before, we've done some Florida shows. What else? I'm trying to think about what else.
And obviously the St. Louis.
We did
yeah,
St.
the
Louis.
Fair,
Yeah, you
right?
read my mind. Yeah, we did that for years and years and still have a big fan base there. We did Nebraska years ago, and that's a 2 weekend show. And it's in the spring, May. It's in May. So sometimes our circuits kind of shift, it's part of its timing, part of its place, so things kind of move around.
Why don't we talk a little bit about what the other main thing that you devote a lot of your time to? So you are on the board of the Rescue Foundation.
Rescue Foundation. Yeah. So for those who are not familiar, Rescue is RESCU. It's Renaissance Entertainers, Services, and Crafters United. We're about 18 years old now, coming up on 2 decades. Oh my goodness. And our mission statement is that we help to promote and maintain the medical health and well-being of participants of Renaissance festivals all across the country. We define participants as people who work or volunteer for the fair. And that's any fair around the country. So we do that mission statement in 3 distinct ways. We do financial aid, we do advocacy work, and we do educational and preventative programs. And in addition to being on the board of directors, I am also the programs chairperson. So that means I help people around the country to set up rescue programs, things like our health fair days, things like our first aid kit giveaways. I help to coordinate the movement of our AED units around the country to different festival sites. So on and so forth. We do mental health first aid training. We do CPR first aid trainings. So it's a lot, and it's one of my big joys. My personality is very much a helper, right? I want to help. I want to know that people are okay. And before we ever got into entertainment and arts, my background is actually in early childhood education. So I worked with the little ones. Just trying to help them and their families to become the best, most beautiful versions of themselves, right? And so even now, when when I approach my work as an artist, and definitely my work in rescue, my volunteer work, it's about helping people, right, on their journeys. We're all on a different journey, but I think we all have something to give, to help each other to become the best and most beautiful versions of ourselves. And I like to think that that shows through in our work on stage. One of the things that, our shows is Judas and Magnolia. Like I said, there's so much variety in them, whether it's the fire or the singing or, the escape artistry or the mind reading, whatever it is. What I love about our Judas and Magnolia shows is that through our narratives, and that roller coaster ride of emotions, we generally at the end, and sometimes we'll hit at the beginning too, but always at the end, we'll come back to kind of a moral of the story. For us, what we do on stage is a practice, a really sacred practice of alchemy, of doing something to create a transformation. And what we're trying to do is transform ourselves and others into the best, most beautiful versions of ourselves through art, right? And I see my work in rescue as a similar something, right? So, in our programs committee, we do these health fair days, or, first aid kit giveaways. And so we're bringing out providers to do health work, pro bono work for our community. But for me, it's not just about that one health fair day or that one CPR first aid class, or that one first aid kit. It's about helping to create a culture in our Ren Fair community that is encouraging people to be active participants in their own health and in the health of others and the health of the community. So an example of that would be, mental health first aid classes. You can get trained so that when someone in your community is in a crisis moment, that you feel like you have the tools so that you're better equipped. You're not a mental health professional by any means, but you've been through this training. And so you're better equipped to step in that moment and say, hey, this is what I see happening, and this is how I think I can help. Can we work together, right? Obviously, same thing with CPR first aid training. If someone's in a crisis, our AED units, you can step in and help your community. And something that I'm really excited about too this year coming up is our rescue folks often will have a Monday morning presence. So at fairs around the country, as people who might have listened to this podcast before might know, we often have bazaars, which are these just wonderful gatherings, right, of the community. And there's usually like a juggling jam going on, and there's some music happening, and there's breakfast happening. Well, we try to put up a rescue table as well. And in addition to just telling people about rescue, we also have been working really hard to do more tangible giveaways. And what we're seeing now, as the community is getting more and more used to there always being some kind of giveaway on the rescue table, people are starting to also get used to donating. So you've got people from within the community, both giving and taking, right? And so we're taking care of each other, and it's that culture of community care for ourselves and others that gets me really excited about the work of rescue.
One thing that warmed my heart about the giveaway that I saw this past year at the Colorado Renaissance Festival, because my bandmate Asia was helping facilitate that.
Yes.
Is what I love is that I feel like in the grand scheme of things, as you might expect, if you took a random polling of humanity at a certain area and there were some Ren Fair people in it, they'd probably be financially near the bottom. Like, yes. we're not like moderately wealthy, most of us. And yet, when it comes to giveaways, people just will be like, no, there are people worse off than me. I don't need any of this. There are people worse off than me. I don't need any of this. To the point where I saw Asia being like, please take something for yourself. Be generous towards yourself. So it's just so heartwarming seeing our community, even though in general, we could all use like an extra box of pasta. just going, no, someone else needs it to that extent. It was just really beautiful to watch.
Yes.
That's
So
fun.
true. So true. That's one of the things that I love the most about our community is the spirit of generosity in our community. Like Rennies are always so willing to give and to share. And yeah, that's definitely a thing of like, well, I don't want to take it because someone else could use it. And I can say that I've seen that both in terms of tangible giveaways, also in terms of money, right? Of that financial aid. People sometimes are hesitant to apply to rescue for help. And so this is something that I learned from one of our other directors. She said, when you participate in this even by taking, right, you're helping us to be stronger, because when we can show that these are the people, these are the amounts of people in all these different areas, all these different demographics that we've helped, that allows it so that we, as rescue, we can get more help from other organizations or entities, right? And so then we can give more. So this is something I've said before, even by taking, you are still participating and you're still making the community stronger overall. So
that's a good message to get out there. So you mentioned that you had your education was in early child development. Is that correct? And so now you have Judas and Magnolia, but I'm curious about what happened in the middle there. How did you get involved with Ren Fairs?
Let's see. Hubs and I met in college, and I was studying early childhood development, and he was studying philosophy and theology to become a priest. Then I snatched him from Jesus, like you do.
Amazing.
No regrets.
So that's always been my headcanon, but I never knew that was actually what happened. So, like, that's my version of the stories, but I did not, in fact, know that was the
yes,
licensed Judas and Magnolia origin
Love it.
All right.
Yeah. So he was studying to be a priest, and we were best friends for years. And then he moved to St. Louis to live in a Vincentian community. So for people who that might not make sense to, there are different Catholic orders of priests or brothers, right? So you've got like the Franciscans or the Dominicans or the Vincentians or the Jesuits, right? So he wanted to be a Vincentian priest. So all the orders kind of have like a different focus. So it's like whoever that is named after, like Saint Dominic or Saint Francis or Saint Vincent, right? They follow the charism of that saint. So like whatever that saint was like super into, that's what that order is going to be about. So Vincentians tend to be very much about serving the poor. And Saint Vincent has always been very important to the hubs. Really tight with St. Vincent. So he wanted to be a Vincentian. So he moved to St. Louis to live in a community of Vincentians. And right before he left, I asked him to go study because I remember I was so upset. I literally remember thinking to myself, "Oh, why does Jesus get all the good ones?" I was so upset. I was so upset that he was going to be a priest.
Oh my gosh. He was like right before the final process, right? There's like a point of no return in that vow.
I mean,
doing it right ish, but
you can leave an order. They'd prefer you not to, like if you take vows, like, do the thing, right? But right before he left, I realized that if I let him leave my life, that I would regret it for the rest of my life. And that is why I asked him to go study. right before he left to St. Louis across the country to live in a religious order. And he said yes. And so, very much on the lowdown, we dated while he was living in this religious community halfway across the country.
Oh, that's a novel waiting to happen, though.
I know.
I know. It's so there.
So our first year dating, like I said, we've been best friends for years, but our first year dating was long distance. And I hated it. And I will come back to that later. So we would visit, right? Like he would come down to Texas, to Denton, our college town, and visit. And I would go up to St. Louis, and we'd switch back and forth. And I mailed him something every week. So he always knew that he had mail to look forward to. So I changed it up every week, but I mailed him something every week. And we did a lot of time on the phone and texting and all that stuff. At the end of his year of service, we kind of had to decide, like, is he going to come back down here to Texas? I was at the time working in public schools, and I also was working at an environmental science education center, which I loved. And actually my mentors there are people that whom I still keep in touch with and still visit and are still very important in my lives. And they come out to Ren Fairs and visit us, and yes, very wonderful. But yeah, so we were like, okay, am I going to move to St. Louis? Is he going to come down here? Well, he had become involved with a Catholic worker house, which is a lay community, which means people who have not taken vows to be a sister or a brother, right? They're just like regular people like us, who are doing the work of the Beatitudes, the spiritual works and the physical works of mercy. And Catholic workers, actually, another pillar of mine throughout 2020 was finally reading the autobiography of Dorothy Day, who's one of the founders of the Catholic worker movement. So there are Catholic worker houses around the world, and they have seven pillars, and they are things like manual labor, the Green Revolution, the works of mercy, the physical and spiritual, decentralization, which is a sneaky term for anarchism, just to be clear about that. And there are three other, I can't remember all of them, I'm so bad. But so he had gotten involved with this. Note on Dorothy Day, reading her autobiography during 2020, particularly around the election, right, in that time, so fascinating, and such a source of inspiration for me, just like in reading Hildegard's life and her trials and tribulations was a way for me to stay grounded. Reading Dorothy Day's autobiography in that time, her struggles with her spirituality, her lens of the political climate, being an anarchist during that time, during the Sacco and Vanzetti martyrs, right? During that time, fascinating. So political turmoil, internal spiritual turmoil, and then also reading that her experiences as a nurse during the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, right? Layers hit real hard for me at that time in my life, right? Okay, so Dorothy Day, Peter Murin, Catholic worker houses. He had become involved with one of the Catholic worker houses in St. Louis. And so basically it was like, are we going to move and be a part of this community and do this work that we feel called to do? Or are we going to start our own Catholic worker house in Denton, Texas, right? So it came down to it, and I moved to St. Louis, and so we were part of that that house, which there were a few in St. Louis at that time, but we were part of one of those houses. I was working at an adjacent urban farm that helped to provide food for the house and for the community. We had a bike shop. We published a zine. What else? We ran a food pantry out of the house. We had a free clothing closet at the time. So I was working in Montessori. Still, I was working in early childhood, and the Hubs was doing social work. And let me tell you, I very strongly believe that all social workers should have unlimited access to all the mental health care that they want and need, because that people burn out so fast in social work. It's a really intense job. And he was working with mentally and physically disabled folks for a while. And then at a different job, he was working with homeless youth, which is so important, so necessary and so heartbreaking. So the way that he tells this story is that he was sitting under the arch, right? Because it's St. Louis, so think Gateway Arch. So he was sitting under the arch one day, and he looks around and he thinks to himself, you know what would make this better? A mime.
I love that.
Right? Yeah, how could you not? And so he's like, I've never seen a mime in person. And so you know what he decides to do? He decides to become a mime. Yes.
Of course. That's clearly
be the change
the
that you
logical
see in the world. And he looks through the phone book and finds St. Louis Mime Entertainment. And he calls a number. And
oh my God.
Jaded, grungy voice picks up and says, whatever. And he says, hello, I'd like to be a mime. And this guy on the other end of the phone says, no one wants a mime anymore, and hangs up.
Wow.
And then I guess the guy star 69 to the number, because then the phone rings and he picks it up and the guy is like, all right, I got a name for you. And he's like, and so he's looking for a pencil and a pad of paper. And this guy is reading off this name and this number. And so he gets this name and number of someone who can teach him mime. And so he starts taking classes in mime. There are one-on-one classes, because it's true, no one wants a mime anymore. It took him a while to figure that out, but he loves mime. And he inspired in me a great love for mime as well. And so we've gone on to study with some great teachers who are so inspirational. And truly the art is just beautiful, so beautiful. But unfortunately, it's true. No one in the United States, at least, really likes mime. He got into clowning, which got me into clowning because I say yes and I have to tell you, I hated clowning at first. I hated it. Clowning is all about the exploration of failure. And as a perfectionist, I hate it. I hate it so much. I hated my first clowning class. I really cannot underscore that enough, because if you're trying to be funny, it's not funny.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you are trying too hard, it's just ugh. And I still remember the moment that I was in front of all my classmates. There's 10 or 12 people and the instructor, and I'm literally in the ring alone with all these stupid fucking props. And I'm trying, it's a simple thing that you're told to do, right? And I was trying to be funny and it wasn't working. And then the moment something messed up and didn't go the way I wanted and it pissed me off, that's when people laughed. And then that pissed me off. And then they laughed harder. And it's that was it.
Yep.
That was it. And that was the moment that I realized that I had to be okay with letting go.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to be okay with not being in control. And that's what that art form is about. And that has made me such a stronger performer and person. And I so much gratitude for clowning.
I never made the connection, because you say like your show is all about alchemy and the alchemy of, you know, what you're doing with the audience. I've only taken one clown class, but it was a Renaissance clown class. It was a commedia class, and it's all based around alchemy. Every character has a specific humor, has a specific element that they are embodying. And so that's such a cool connection that you guys have that link.
From there, that just opened the door to a bunch of other circus arts, right? Like aerial, silks, lyra, hula hoop, fire, you know, fire breathing, fire eating, blah, blah, blah. Like all this other, you know, rollabola, juggling, you know, yes. And I can honestly say that I have taken a universal truth, right? Like a higher wisdom from each of those classes, each of those instructors, that is so much deeper, like goes so beyond like, yeah, I know how to juggle, but let me tell you what I really learned from my juggling coach, right? Like from each of those. That's really like the door to our background and variety. And in the St. Louis scene, there's such a cool connection of artists, right? Because of that, that foundation, that support system that I talked about earlier. I specifically mentioned the VLAA and RAC, the Regional Arts Commission, but artists in St. Louis are, in my opinion, really well connected between the disciplines, right? So when we were there was a really cool synergy of circus and burlesque and sideshow happening. And so it's like, once you get into that scene, like everybody knows everybody kind of thing, right? And just some great shows happening. And so once we got into that, and the hubs had been doing mime for a while. And like I said, it is true. No one wants a mime anymore, unfortunately, because it's a beautiful art form. But I tell you what, Americans love to hate mimes. So the hubs similarly realized that just like no one had seen a mime, but knew what mimes were. There's like this cultural like recognition of like, even if you've never seen a mime in person, when you see one, you're like, oh, that's a mime. Same thing with escape artists. He realized, oh, I've never seen an escape artist, but pretty much everyone knows what an escape artist is, right? And so it's that magic idea of, wait, you're an escape artist? What? I've never, what? Ooh, right? It pulls you in. And then, you know, we hit them with like Kafka and Camus. And as Olivia mentioned earlier, you know, we've got these deep themes going on. We're really going for that alchemy of the soul, but we pull you in with the escape art and the fire dancing. You know? And so that was that trajectory. And he made up his mind that was what he wanted to do full time. And he put his full self into pursuing art full time. And so when I realized that, I said, okay, what can I also do to help make this work? Because I knew from our first year together, which was long distance, I knew that I didn't want to be long distance. I didn't want him to be off on some circus, on some show, and he's away and I'm there. You know, I was like, we did that once. I know I'm not interested in that again. So if you're going to do this, what can I do so that we can be together? what can I do so that everyone can get their needs met? You can be a full-time artist. I can be with you. How do we make that happen? So I always try to say yes and, because to me it's a teamwork situation. So I started some of the circus arts, and specifically face paint and henna. So he would get hired to do like a clowning or juggling or balloon twisting gig. And then he'd say, by the way, my wife is a face painter, right? And so those go together, right? So that's a yes and. So we're getting hired to do all this stuff on the weekends. And he was working with Circus Flora in St. Louis. He was doing their hospital clowning program, which is a beautiful bridge between the social work that he was just coming out of and the art, the full-time art that he was going into. So rewarding. Also a lot, when you're working with kids who have terminal illnesses, right? That's a lot. There's a lot going on there. And so the circus was up, and we were on the lot, and we met an incredible human who defies explanation. His name is Chico, and some folks know him on the Ren Fair circuit as well. He does circus and fair. And we were on the lot one day, and he was holding a Renaissance Fair magazine. And I said, oh my gosh, I love Ren Fairs. I said, can I look through that? I love Ren Fairs so much. My family, we used to go when I was a kid. We went every year. And oh, that's so cool. I didn't know that magazine existed, right? And he was like, oh yeah, feel free to look through it. And so he let me borrow it. And, the next week or something, he was like, hey, did you read the magazine? I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I loved it. Thank you so much. And he's like, hey, if you really like Ren Fairs, I've got a buddy who's starting one up in Texas. I could introduce you, if you want. And we were like, okay. And so it turned out this buddy was starting Ren Fair, didn't have a children's act or a juggling act. And the hubs was like, oh yeah, I've got that. And so once he got hired, he wrote a show.
Amazing.
Wrote a juggling show, because necessity is the mother of all creativity. And I got hired on
what year was that around? Was that Avalon? Was that the Avalon Fairs or the Four Winds?
14 Avalon, maybe 14, gotcha. 2014. Mm-hmm. And so that was our first Ren Fair. And so a note on that. And so that is how we got into Ren Fairs. And Amazing. So we started out, we realized really quickly that it's really hard for partners to get hired at the same places if you're doing different things, because we would contact these places and they'd be like, oh no, we already have a juggling show, but we do need a face painter. Or like, no, we've already got a face painter, but we need a kids show. Right. And so that was really the moment when he realized we just needed to be in a show together. And that's when he wrote the Firebox show. That was the first show that we did together. Great. So he was doing the escape artist stuff, right, in St. Louis in like that variety scene. So, and it was going really well. And so he was like, I'm just going to write an escape artist show with both of us. And so that's how that started. And our shows, we really bill as family shows. And I like to make very clear that a family show is not the same thing as a kid's show, right? So a kid's show is the kind of thing that is really geared towards children, and the adults might sit there and also like it just fine, right? But it's really for the kids. Whereas a family show has something for everyone, right? So if a family comes to our show, we're going to have some jokes that are going to go over the kids' heads, right? that's for the adults, right? But the kids are also gonna love, you know, the fire and the singing, and then he got out of the box, and then he jumped out with these and you know, the kids are gonna be into it too. But there's something for the adults, and it's not necessarily a kid show, right? Because we're low key talking about suicide prevention, right? Like that's not a kid show. Right? Like there's some deeper things going on there, right? But the kids can come to the show and they will enjoy it. And we are happy to have them there, right? But there's a difference between a family show and a kid show. And I always say we are a family show. So bring everyone, right? Bring everyone in the family. So we had mentioned that the Avalon Fair is the first fair that we did together. And our wedding bands, when I proposed to him, the bands that I got for us were initially Osage Orange. So they were wooden bands, and Osage Orange is a tree that is native to Texas, which we're both from. But you can also find it in the St. Louis area up in Missouri, and that's where we were based out of at the time. And it's beautiful, beautiful wood. And so I had ordered those for us. Well, because we juggle clubs and knives and heavy things, rings are not great for juggling, right? And so eventually both of the bands, his and mine, did both break. But what we did is I have now what I wear is this ring. Let's see if you can see it. So this is the chalice well, and this symbology is often linked to the Avalon mythos, right? So I picked this up at the Avalon Fair, the first fair we ever did together. And so this is what I wear now in that space. And the ring that he wears, we also got at that fair, and inscribed on it, it's a simple band, but inscribed on it, it says "Growing in Love." And that was the theme of our wedding ceremony that I wrote. And those are our vows. And that's the goal, is growing in love. So that's just a little bit more on that Avalon Fair to wrap that up.
Thank you so much for joining us here. This has been another episode of Ren Talks, presented by the Digital Ren Fair. My name is Victoria Van Arnam, and I perform as the Lady Victoria. And you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Today I've been joined by Olivia Harding.
Yes, I'm Olivia Harding. I perform as Liv the Druid with Music the Gathering, and you can find Music the Gathering at Music the Gathering Band across social media or musicthegathering.com.
Wonderful. And our special guest today was Magnolia Strange. Magnolia, where can folks find you?
You can find us at judasandmagnolia.com and across our social media platforms.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you later. Ciao, ciao.
See you, friends.
Bye. Have a good day.